The London GT broke the record as the biggest ever Warhammer 40k tournament, with a whopping 1,087 players battling it across 2 days to determine once for all who will be crowned the ultimate 40k player, who gets to play against a guy who's now won it 3 times in a row. And of those 1,087 people, I was one of them. Screaming Ravens and I descended onto another grand tournament with 18 Centurions in the hopes that I can grab at least 1 victory, and grab 1 victory I did. In fact, I overachieved, grabbing a massive 2 wins out of my 5 games. But most importantly, I had 5 great, fun games with 5 awesome opponents. I need to do my standard 40k tournament glazing spiel before we get into my list and the games, because I know there are a few of you out there that still don't think that these events are for you. And maybe they aren't, but that's fine. But if you're at all unsure, I highly encourage you try it. According to the UKTC folks, out of all the players across all the games, there were less than 5 serious incidents that a judge had to really properly get involved in. So out of 2,500 games of Warhammer with 5,000 different combinations of opponents, less than 5 proper issues were raised. I mean, we kind of have to take their word for it, but of all the players I spoke to, and that was a lot of people I spoke to, because apparently I'm quite easy to find with my colourful army of Centurions, my bold head and silly objective list. You guys followed that up your shop. All of them said that every game they had was great, win or lose, and some of you made new friends with their opponents. And don't think that just because your army isn't meta, you can't have fun. Somebody brought a list with 3 Khorne Lord of Skulls. I played on the table next to a guy who brought a bloody Thunderhawk and went into Tau, which was very unfortunate. That game seemed to end very quickly. And of course, I myself continued to try and make 18 Centurions a thing, which turns out may actually be a thing now, because another Paul managed to make 9 Centurions work with a top 8 finish using the Shadowmark Talon attachment. For all those who seem to think this is me, it isn't. Just because he has a lot of Centurions and his name is Paul doesn't make him me. I mean, I'm going to be honest, you really should be able to work that out based on the fact that he was winning most of his games. I'm nowhere near that great, and I'll be deep into cold ground before I'm seen without double-digit Centurions in my list. Thank you to everyone who came up to me and chatted. It was great to meet so many awesome people. Some actually asked for a photo with me, and one person even asked me to sign their codex. It was a guard codex, so I made sure to indicate my displeasure, but still, that was very cool. I got to feel like a big shot and continue to massively overinflate my ego. Now, with all that out of the way, let's get down to business to defeat the heretics with my Screaming Ravens Shadowmark Talon army list. I won't go through all the ruling decisions that UKTC made about Shadowmark Talon and the Oath of Moment, as when I wrote that section for this video, I realized it was going to be so goddamn long, I needed to make an entire other video about it. But Shadowmark Talon is still an incredibly powerful detachment, even without the better oath. And it comes with the additional benefit of getting to feel superior to Salamander's Imperial Fist players whose reworked detachments aren't nearly as impactful. If you watched my previous tournament video, then this list will be familiar to you, as it has barely changed from the Winchester RTT, the only change being that I dropped a squad of infiltrators for Aethan Shan, the new Raven Guard Chapter Master. He helps boost the Shadowmark Talon detachment to an insane level, and he fights alongside Caven Shrike, who leads 10 jump pack intercessors. Alongside that is 2 smaller units of JPIs for fast moving utility and scoring, a Judicia with what I always called Blade Driven Deep because I cannot remember the new name of the enhancement, leads 6 Blade Guard veterans to infiltrate early and solidify a position, a lone op jump captain with Big Hammer, and a combi lieutenant giving me some small footprint units to do sneaky stuff with a squad of intercessors there to try and make their way around the board to sticky up objectives. All of that is to facilitate the other half of my army, my main core. 18 Centurions. 12 Devastators in 1 big block of 6 and 2 squads of 3, and 2 squads of 3 Assault Centurions, half with Flamers and half with Melters. I'll talk through my games, talk about what went well, what didn't go so well, and also what works and what doesn't. My plan kind of evolved over the course of the event, taking the teachings of the Winchester RTT further to really solidify a game plan. However, that game plan was helped by the addition of Aethan Shan, because holy shit is Aethan Shan amazing in this detachment. He basically did no damage, and in fact died every single game without really doing anything impactful, but just having him on the board is such a power multiplier that I think he really is a must take for the Shadowmark Talon. Just by having the free Into Darkness, he saves so many command points, which is something my list really struggled with, having to use a lot of stratagems but never having the resource to use all of my tricks. Now though, most games I was entering my turn 2 with 4 command points, having already put 2 things into reserves. And that's before you even get into his re-rolling charge ability, which the more I read, the more I think maybe it does force you to target your chosen unit. Fortunately, that reading was basically how I played it anyway, because I only ever chose units I wanted to charge it with everything nearby. Maybe that was the joke of the video, and I said it wrong on purpose to prove a point. No, I didn't. Of course not. I'm just a fucking idiot. And the best part of Aethan Shan is that he fits into my Mad Case 2 over at TemplarStronghold.com. That's right, it's time for a rerollable charge directly into the sponsor time. I think I've just pulled a muscle in my back saying sponsor time too aggressively. Oh, God, ow. That actually really hurt. I'm going to have to lie down. Only my back was as strong as the carry cases and terrain from Tabletop.com. The Mad Case 2 is made from sturdy MDF, has adjustable trays that allow bottles of any size fit. Securely, the power of madness makes transporting on is painless, unlike me right now. Free shipping to here, those places. Code 425, 25% off. There's just words on screen if you fall. I'm gonna need a minute. Ow. Let's get into the games. My first one being against Ashley and his Space Wolves. Ashley was a super nice guy with a wonderfully painted Space Wolves army with the Saga of the Beast Slayer attachment, which gives lethal hits against characters, monsters, and vehicles, or everything if you complete your Saga. Completing your Saga requires you killing half of your opponent's units that have those keywords rounding up. The problem for Ashley is that I have no monsters or vehicles. I do have 5 characters though, so he would need to kill 3 of those to get his Saga complete and his army-wide lethal hits. Unfortunately, 3 of them are low knot, 1 is low knot when needing a unit, and 1 is a Fights First Justicia with 6 Blade Guard. I've not played against Space Wolves before, and this list looks like it's about to give me the crash course on all the unique Wolfy warriors. There's only 5 units in the list are generic Space Marine units, and everything else is some flavor of Nordic-themed nastiness. I'm not going to talk through every single unit and what they do, because that'll make the video far too goddamn long. Instead, I'll leave that to one of my wonderful YouTube members to tell me everything I need to know on my super secret supporters Discord channel. And yes, that was the worst membership plug I've ever done. Give me your money. What you do need to know is that Space Wolves are fast, brutal melee killers, full of advance and charge, vicious close quarters damage output, and other tricks to keep themselves on the hunt for a long time. In particular, the Wolf Touch Wolf Priest with Wolf and with Wolf Shields, a very tough, fast, and devastating unit that, although is better into vehicles and monsters, is still extremely scary into Toughness 4 Space Marine bodies. You don't need Anti-Infantry 3 when you wound on 2s. The Wolfram of Shield Wall Street don't just dish out the pain, they can take it as well. With a 4+ Inven save and being able to regen the balls with the Wolf Priest, this is a nasty brick that can really tear any of my units apart. The other very scary unit is Logan Grimnar, the Space Wolves Chapter Master. The big bad wolf travels with a pack of 5 Wolfguard Terminators, giving out the Vect aura within 12 inches of this extremely resilient unit, as well as being able to come in from reserves turn 1. So making sure he doesn't build a den in my deployment zone is very important here. Speaking of deployment, here's the deployment. Swimming engagement with the Terraform primary mission. Terraform has been changed for this new season, and it's much more of an interesting back and forth. 4 victory points for each controlled objective marker, and 1 victory point for each terraformed objective. This time, however, Terraform is completed at the end of your turn, and you can now un-terraform an objective. So there's more of a back and forth. Also, Terraform is scored at the end of every turn, so each battle round there are 2 opportunities for players to score. I did my normal thing with Infiltrators, which is not going super far, but keeping myself close to get onto the 2 side objectives with my Fights First unit, and the Combat Lieutenant without being shot up if I don't go first. And most other things are far back enough out of line of sight that they are safe from a turn 1 alpha strike. I have my 2 3-man units of Devastating Centurions in strategic reserves, as I do for every single game, and my Hammer Captain is in Deep Strike. Ashley had a very similar plan with Logan Grimnar going into reserves and the rest of his army deploying with a good amount of width. He's fast enough that he can reach a lot of the areas of the board pretty quick from any position. We roll off and I am going second, which I did for every single game at this event. I'm now on a 10-game going second streak. Somehow, though, that still hasn't caught up to my 13-game going first streak from earlier in the year. I'd really like to have some variety, please, dice. Normally, going second can be quite advantageous, with the 5th round scoring being the end of the turn, and that can give you some fairly big swings. However, Terraform is one that going second is a bit trickier, as the person going first can try and flood the board for Terraform, and with Space Wolves being so fast, and me being not so fast, that could cause problems if I let Terraform points get out of control. I sent my Blade Guard out to be a blocker on the right flank. With Fights First, they are a scary thing to charge, but not so scary that Ashley's Wolfen would back down from that fight. But it would at least tie up that unit while I focus my efforts on the other side of the board, using the free uppy downy with Into Darkness to get my big block of 6 Devastating Centurions into positions for nice angles alongside the 2 lots of 3. The Assault Centurions are there to run interference, which they didn't really do much of, so they got destroyed pretty quick. And my hope was that I was able to focus my efforts onto the left flank so I can win there, then start to sweep across with Shrike and the JPIs, backed up by suppressing fire with the Centurions in the space that I carved out. That plan actually worked. Kind of, but it was going too slow. The Impulsor carrying the Head Takers and Ragnar's Blood Claws did go down eventually, but not before taking their pound of flesh. Meanwhile, the Wolfen had dealt with the Blade Guard and were making their way over, with the other group of Blood Claws taking the middle and terraforming. With my Centurions, I managed to take those center Blood Claws out, but I was too trigger happy with my JVIs, throwing them away too early, and whilst they managed to get the middle for some secondaries, it didn't last long, and Logan brought down the hammer and reinforced that central objective. By the end of turn 4, though, the plan was looking like it was going to actually give me a victory. I finally had the left side of the board cleared, and the Centurions had really run riot over the Space Wolves, taking out a Ballistus, the entire Wolfen squad, and Logan Grimnar with his entire entourage, leaving the center objective ripe for the taking. I still had 11 Centurions, 4 characters, and my intercessors, but as you can see, the problem is where they are. I hadn't managed to stop Terraform from snowballing and was hemorrhaging points every turn. I was doing well on secondaries, but I needed an extremely potent turn 5 to really bring this one back. And that's when Ashley struck the killing blow with Bjorn the Fell-Handed. Up to this point, Bjorn hadn't really done a whole lot of actioning. Similar to Ethan Shan, he was really sitting back and giving Ashley advantages without having to really participate in the action. He has an ability that gives 1 command point each turn, just for Bjorn being there, so he's quite good to have around. In his turn 4, he'd move Bjorn over, but not anywhere that I could really get to him, and it seemed like he was kind of not going to be impactful. He was still in his deployment zone. On his turn 5, Bjorn pounced and showed why Boxnauts should still be respected. Shrike and Shan were positioned as my fast units that could take back the center and terraform it, but Bjorn charged from that building, out of line of sight for any overwatch, critically wounded Shrike with his shooting before charging into Shan and demolishing him with just tank shock. Shan going down meant I couldn't use Into Darkness for free, and I had 0 command points left. With Shan alive, I could have put something into reserves and come down and tried to charge with a rerollable charge to try and get some extra points, but without that, I have far fewer tools to get the points I need on my turn. And what's worse is that he's positioned in a place that if Shrike moves, Bjorn can overwatch and delete him. I had no choice. I had to take the risk and try and get Shrike onto the center objective, but that Hellfrost cannon was too much and took Shrike down in Overwatch. My other characters managed to get some points, but failing to get onto that middle point meant I was powerless to defeat the Space Wolves. A very close 74-86 defeat. A really fun back and forth game that showed my plan does kind of work, but I need to make sure I don't let the primary get too far ahead and I'm not stuck too far back. Sounds like a very familiar issue with my list, having many Centurions alive but not enough time to bring the score back. Perhaps I need to be more aggressive in getting control of No Man's Land. Maybe playing too far back and having to have my jump units cover such a massive distance late game isn't going to get me any victories, and I need to make sure that I can utilize the speedier parts of my army better, especially when game 2 is going to be against one of the fastest armies in the game, Aeldari. After participating in England's favourite pastime to get some lunch, I went into game 2 against Antonio's Aeldari. Antonio was a super nice guy, playing the entire spectrum of Aspect Warriors with small squads of basically every trick in the Aeldari book, headlined by a big squad of 10 Dark Reapers. I've got some experience against Aeldari with a 2-1 record against them, so I felt like I had a decent shot at the win here. Purge the Foe with the Crucible of Battle deployment seemed okay to me, as he had a lot of small units that could help rack up those Purge points. Unfortunately, my deployment was terrible, and my game plan fell apart very quickly. I put my Blade Guard forward, hoping that if he sent anything up here, their fights first, 4 up Invuln, and 3 wounds would slow the Aeldari down, but unfortunately, that was simply not the case. As the Wave Serpent containing the 10 Dark Reapers drove over, popped out, deleted them, and hopped back in. Then, in my first turn, I made a massive mistake. Doubling down. I threw my jump pack units forward in the hope of trying to get rid of as many things as possible on both flanks and get a small area denial in the center. I might lose some jump pack assessors, but then Antonio will be in perfect positions for the Centurions to come down and find their angles and destroy him. At the start of Battle Round 2, Antonio said, "This is what the Aeldari call a go turn," and a go turn it was. I simply did not appreciate the speed and damage that Aeldari can dish out. The Screaming Ravens were all but destroyed, and I had nowhere that I could really put down my Centurions. I was completely overrun. From there, it was elementary. I was handed an extremely well-crafted craft world walloping, a 52-100 defeat. Now, this wasn't helped with the dice, as I seemingly couldn't roll higher than a 3 for any armor save. Antonio's 5 of Invulns were popping off, and Ethan Shan failed a 4-inch charge. But the problem is that those armor saves are not saves I should have been making anyway. So blaming the dice for losses is never a good idea. You don't learn anything from that. My plan was flawed from the start, and the dice just sped up my demise. It was not the cause of it. This is a dice game, so you have to account for that, and the best players are the ones who can get the best outcome with the lowest risk. For me, things like killing 5 striking scorpions and getting 2 points in area denial were not worth getting them killed, and not being able to utilize my teleporting Centurions. Shrike going forward and losing his entire squad and his own life to Jane's Eye and the Howling Banshees was stupid, frankly, especially because I know exactly what kind of blender they are. And Shan failing for its charge is annoying, but it was a charge he shouldn't have had to make in the first place. There's one thing I can teach new players, it's never blame the dice. I can't stress how important that is. Don't reason how much I'm reinforcing that point, it's absolutely not foreshadowing for later. Game 3 was against Christina and her Sisters of Battle. Christina was a super nice gal and had a very interesting army list that brought all the shielded ladies. 3 squads of 10 Celestian Sacrosants, all led by Hospitaliers. Or Hospitalers, or Hospitalers. It's a word I'm going to pronounce many different ways, and it's very difficult to say with my supersonic speaking cadence, and in fact, it's just a very difficult word to say at all. These Apothecaries.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Give the already tough unit a 5-up feel no pain and the ability to bring destroyed models back. And Sacrosants being led also have -1 to wound against them. It might just be toughness 3 and 1 wound, but these blocks are deceptively hard to shift. Morven Val leads the charge with her squad of Paragon Warsuits, the Centurions of the Sororitas, along with a couple of fast jump units, some Arcoflagellants, Sanctifies, which is a new kill team, which I'll be honest, not really sure what it does, and a couple more characters, and the Triumph of Saint Catherine. The Triumph of Saint Catherine is one of the weirdest units in the game. A big model that hands out a bunch of different buffs to units nearby, with 18 wounds, 4 invuln, and toughness 3. 18 wounds and toughness 3. What a bizarre profile. The mission is hidden supplies with the search and destroy deployment. There's an extra objective marker in No Man's Land, and points are rewarded for holding 1, 2, and more outside of your deployment zone. As I'm 0 for 2, I thought I might as well, for this last game of the day, try something a little different with my deployment and see if I can make something work by focusing in a different way. Normally, I would focus one way, but spread out a little bit to make sure I can harass my opponent's natural expansion, which is the objective that you're most likely to be able to get and keep from your deployment. Even though this is asymmetrical deployment with the objective markers being the same distance from both of us, the terrain shows which one is our natural expansion, as the directions of these ruins make it a lot easier for me to hide and develop on this left side, and Christina will have an easier time on the right side. This time I thought, you know what? You can have that objective. I'm going to take a stranglehold of this half of the board and work my way down. Christina can move quite fast with some abilities that increase movement, but not really fast enough to lock me in. And by having my blade guard positioned as a very nasty threat that gets to fight first, and Christina having limited shooting options, I can be pretty safe in playing a slow and controlled game. Both of our first turns were very cagey, with both armies rotating their main forces towards the corners and positioning to take hold of the middle and start the back and forth. I pushed some Assault Centurions forward into this ruin. These would need quite a lot to get rid of them, and Christina responded by bringing Val and a squad of Sacrosants out to play. Between shooting and charges, she did manage to take out 3 of my Assault Centurions and take a good position on most of the central objectives, which is exactly what I wanted. 12 Devastated Centurions drop in and delete all of the Arcoflagellants, most of the Sacrosants, and with Oath of Moment on Val's Paragon squad, deal 0 wounds because she saved every single 4 of invuln. 6 las cannons from my big Devastated Centurion squad did nothing. Oh no. Jump back intercessors managed to get in and kill the remaining Sacrosants and also take the objective so I don't get caught out by letting Christina hold more. And alongside the Assault Centurions, put a very big OC score on them. But despite the decent hits, Morven Val being fully operational is a problem. On her turn 3, Christina marches forward but can't hide from a Devastating Centurion overwatch, which manages to make up for the unfortunate shooting phase and takes out 2 of the Paragon Warsuits, which does somewhat reduce Val's output, but not really enough. And she takes a chunk out of my army and only leaves me on 1 objective, with Val and a large block of Sacrosants to clear out. I managed to do a decent amount, but not quite enough, as the OC2 Sacrosants managed to keep hold of that objective going into turn 4. However, they definitely won't last another turn. They are locked in combat with Fight's first blade guard, so they fall back behind the ruin to fight another day. This turns out to be a bit of a problem, as I move my blade guard forward and hold steady. If she wants to take this objective from me now, it'll have to be through Fight's first unit. And I can spend the time moving my Shrike unit around to keep them busy and locked away, while Centurions teleport around, picking off anything that's left. But there are some Zephyrim on my hope objective that have managed to pick off Aeth and Shan. Again. But fortunately, I had some spare command points this time to make sure that at least by the end of my turn, Christina did not hold that and caused a point swing in my round 5 by blocking me holding more. With most of the threats neutralized and space to move around, I managed to hold 1, 2, and more by the end of the game and pulled out a very narrow victory, 76 to 67. I will say that Christina's card draw was kinda crap turn 1 and 2, and losing out on 2 rounds of secondary scoring really did cause problems in the end. Of course, as she'd drawn cards she could score turn 1 and 2, maybe her units would have been in different positions. That changed the game, but still, it's a tricky situation to navigate when you get bad turn 1 cards. It's something I don't really know how to deal with. It feels like a waste to spend command points to redraw so early, and Christina's turn 2 draw was basically just a turn too early. So getting rid of them, something potentially worse, or trying to force Overwhelming and Storm a turn early when I hadn't got much to go at, did tip the game in my favor. But that is day 1 complete, and I've got my 1 win. At the very least, I'll be matching my South Coast Super Major record. I could still go 3-2, but as long as I get 2 fun games with excellent opponents tomorrow, I don't really mind what happens. It's nice to get at least 1 win though. It really does help the ego. Day 2 begins with game 4 against Brandon's Orks. Brandon was a super nice guy and had a classic Warhorde list, which included Gazkul Thraka with the biggest, baddest block of boys. This scary combo is new thanks to the recent Balanced State slate, which allowed Gaz to lead boys. You take 20 boys, add Gaz, and as you can now add another leader because of the boys rule, you take a big mech with follow me lads. You war, and then you use the stratagem here we go. That gives you +2 inches of movement, +2 to advance and charge, rerollable advance, and you can advance through enemy units so you can just ignore the screens. With max rolls, that's a threat range of 30 bloody inches for proper crumping, and it's absolutely impossible to try and explain anything orky without doing an orc voice, but I do need to stop it because it is hurting my throat. When that combo does inevitably reach you, that's a lot of attacks that are lethal hits on 5s with +1 to hit and wound, and rerolling 1s to hit and +1 attacks and strength, and a 5-up invuln. I don't want that unit anywhere near my face. This was a very weird game, but in a good way. It was very atypical for what you'd expect from this matchup, but if you look at deployment, you can kind of see why this game ended up being so strange. It's the Crucible of Battle deployment again, but the primary is Linchpin. I had Intercessors on my home to sticky it, and Charm for some extra backfield screening to stop any store boys being cheeky, and the Combi Lieutenant down here just to be a bit of an annoyance. I then shoved everything else that started on the board in this corner, including barely infiltrating my Blade Guard, pushing him just outside my deployment zone, but staging so Brandon could easily get a first blood like Antonio did. Brandon did what Orcs do and deployed everything as far forward as he could, wanting to make sure that if he had the chance, he could war and let the green tide wash over my army and drag them back into the Orcish Ocean. Turn 1, Brandon stages his army and sends a battle wagon towards the top objective. I bide my time and do a few minor moves, but mostly stay out of arm's reach. This confuses the Orcs, and as I have very little on the board, Brandon tentatively brings a few more things forward but holds off on the war for turn 2, and I put even more things into strategic reserves with 3 into darkness. And in a very Screaming Ravens fashion, I strike from all angles. On my turn 2, I drop all 6 of my units that were in reserves. 12 Devastating Centurions line up from all angles. My turn 2 reserved Assault Centurions come down to set Orc flesh on fire, and I drop my Hammer Captain and a unit of JPIs right into Brandon's backfield with a rerollable charge onto his grots holding his home. Look at this board state. 12 las cannons have angles on 2 trucks. Flamers are ready to burn anything that tries to jump out the wreckage. Missiles can wipe out the t-shirt, save orc bodies, and I have a path to take away his linchpin and force him to turn around to deal with it. My other squad of Assault Centurions have a 5-inch charge into the wall to get into combat with the battle wagon, and the Blade Guy here can then wrap it up and force a desperate escape when it's inevitably destroyed. This is quintessential and lore-accurate Screaming Ravens battle tactics. I've absolutely snookered the Orcs here. Then, I barely do anything. Remember that top tip, that one extremely important piece of advice I told you about never blame the dice? Yeah, fuck that. This game is entirely the fault of the dice. I'm so fucking mad about this one. Holy shit. Somehow, 12 las cannons fail to take out 2 trucks. The missiles don't take out that many of the Orc squads because they're also obscenely low on shots, hits, and damage. I do manage to get the JPRs onto Brandon's home objective, wipe out the grots, but the Assault Centurions fail that 5-inch charge. And I spent a command point to re-roll it, and they still failed. The war is called, and I am just overrun. I cannot make a single save, and the 5 invulns completely new to my damage output. Gaz barely did any damage. He only killed 5 JPIs and 3 intercessors, but he didn't need to because I just lost everything else to the rest of his army immediately. And just to add insult to injury, my 6-man devastated squads against Big Gaz block only killed 13 boys because of the -1 wound strat. Charm once again failed to do anything, missing basically every fucking attack and then died to wars because apparently rolling a 4 is impossible. And my Hammer Captain tried to save a crumb of face, went into 3 knobs and rolled 3 1s to wound. And the final round against the 1 remaining knob, that Jump Captain did no damage and then died because I cannot make a goddamn 4-up invuln save. At one point, I had my Centurion sitting on 3s and re-rolling 1s with I think it was 13 missile shots, and I rolled 8 2s. 8 2s! Even Brandon said he didn't think I did anything wrong, and he was very worried after turn 2, but the dice just decided that apparently my best laid plans were going to mean nothing. I think the entire second half of the game, 80% of my dice were rolled 3 or below. That's how goddamn bad this was. It was just so fucking funny. God damn, this game was so daft. I thought I had it in the bag. I thought I successfully made Randon stall his war too long. I had the angles, I had everything right, but what are you going to do? It's dice game, sometimes it happens. The main thing is that this was a fun game against a great opponent. It's now a very funny story I can tell. That leaves me with one more chance to improve on my South Coast Super Major record, and I would get that chance in a very similar way to how I started. A fast, brutal, melee-heavy Divergent Space Marine chapter. But this time, Black Templars. Game 5 was against Roman, who was a super nice guy, playing Black Templars with the Gladius Task Force detachment. The most exciting part of this list isn't the Black Templar exclusive characters, of which there are many, or the Templar unique units, or the fact that for some reason Black Templars have a different data sheet for impulsors and repulsors that just happens to give them an extra melter for no goddamn reason. No, the most exciting thing about this army is that this is the first time I get to play against Centurions with my own Centurions. Roman's list had 3 devastating Centurions that, like mine, start in strategic reserve so that they can come down and delete an unsuspecting foe. I played this game basically the exact same as I did the previous 2. Gather it in one area, rotate to my natural expansion, clear a space, and blast away anything that dares to get into range. The only real difference is what I did with my Assault Centurions, which was to keep them close to the center behind this ruin to try and be in a safe position to potentially pop out, especially against one of the 2 repulsive executioners in Roman's army that may want to drive down the center and aim that big cannon at something to remove it from existence. Roman did a similar thing, but was once again cagey against the threat of 12 devastated Centurions coming down into the gaps and annihilating him before they get to do anything useful, and that works in my favor. One of Roman's impulsors containing Sword Brethren and a Castellan stayed in his bottom corner until turn 5, mostly trying to screen that area, but also just waiting for the right opportunity to go in, an opportunity that never came. That caution also led Roman to declare his once per game advanced charge ability too soon, and only managed to utilize it on one unit, which he could have done with a stratagem instead. The Screaming Ravens successfully did a lore-accurate battle. They confused and overwhelmed the enemy. Roman brought down his 3 Centurions to try and take out some JPIs holding my expansion objective, but I did the very rude thing of overwatching them and taking one out, and then later showing Roman the incredible power of simple mathematics. 18 is greater than 3. My tactic actually worked again, and unlike game 4, the dice were relatively normal. Aether Shan died in turn 5 again, and losing Shan in the 3 up and down, it did cause me problems trying to get those turn 5 points. I gotta say, the Emperor's Champion is a nasty son of a bitch. With the Gladius enhancement, the Honor Vehement, that's 7 attacks, strength 9, AP 3, damage 3, hitting on 2s, anti-character 5, plus devastating wounds and precision, and gets +2 to charge against characters. He is an absolute character blender. God damn, I want one for the Screaming Ravens. It was another fairly close win, 86-73, with both of us being very cautious on secondary and basically scoring 10 every round of primary until I managed to get myself situated in the center briefly in turn 4 and getting the max primary in turn 5 with a cheeky advance with Shrike and the JPIs to steal his home objective. As this game played very similarly to game 3 and 4, I don't want to go through it beat by beat. Also, I was tired at this point, didn't take enough photos. But in a future video, I do want to talk more about this game in relation to playing by intent and how 40k really is a co-op game. To be clear, that isn't to say my other 4 games weren't similar against excellent opponents. They were all delightful, extremely friendly people and perfect examples of sportsmanship. But this game in particular had some really nice highlights from both Roman and myself. But like the video I did about rules as written, I could spend another 15-20 minutes talking about that topic, so I'll split that out into another video that I'll do later. And this time, I won't have to spontaneously write, record, animate, and edit a video in 2 days to rush it out. I mean, I didn't have to do that for the other video, but look, my ADHD brain does what it wants, okay? So 5 games, 5 awesome people I'd be more than happy to play against again. 5 games going second against 5 fast aggressive melee armies where both my victories were on the same deployment that I always seem to do well on. I'm very happy to get my 2-3 record. It beats my South Coast Super Major record, and I feel a lot more competitive in my games compared to my first big event. I'm more confident in the list and my strategy, and honestly, there's nothing better than these 2-day events to really accelerate your 40k abilities, and seeing that evolution over time feels great. So what works and what doesn't? What am I going to change for my next event? I've put each of my units into a tier list. Now, this tier list is not based on their actual strength or how good they are, but instead on how good they were for me and how I utilized them. A unit that could be considered an extremely powerful S tier unit for other armies might not be S tier for me based on how I found them, how they fit into the list, and how I was using them. The idea with this system is you want a list of basically only S tier, but that tier can change based on my strategy, not just their power. So in the S tier, the 6-man Devastated Centurions. Holy shit, MVP unit, literally never lost a single model all tournament and killed, God, I don't know, fucking everything. These guys are absurd. Anti-tank, anti-infantry, anti-elite, reliable, resilient. There is no substitute. But what takes that from being absolutely absurd to just astronomically ridiculous is the other S tier unit. Aether Shan. If Shan doesn't get nerfed, I'd be extremely surprised. Did he do damage? Fuck no, he whiffed every single combat he got into. But like I said at the start of the video, he is such a power multiplier. Free into darkness is busted, and whatever reading you have of his charge reroll is extremely strong either way. And if he does manage to roll a die higher than a 3, he can really be a potent melee threat. And his 14-inch move means he can just get anywhere he wants. For 85 points, he's absolutely nuts. points. My fear is that GW will do the classic triple knock, increasing points for the heavily utilized units like Centurions, plus change the rules and increase chance points as well. If I may suggest a nerf, Games Workshop, and I know you're definitely not watching, it would be to make it so that his free Into Darkness only works if you use the Phobos unit portion of it. It keeps the flavor, it keeps it useful, it allows you to make a more thematic Phobos-themed Raven Guard army around him, but it still does allow you to teleport Centurions, you just have to pay the privilege for it. And I would pay it. It just means that I can't go into my turn 2 overflowing with command points, with infinite Centurions superpositioning themselves all over the battlefield. In the A tier, we have the 2 squads of 3 Devastated Centurions. They start the game with reserves and join the cacophony with incredible results. The only issue is that 3 is less than 6. My army is very good at simple maths.
The numbers don't lie!
And whilst I might want to make these 2 groups of 3 into another big group of 6, that does make it trickier to find space for them. Having the smaller squads was nice for finding more angles in smaller spaces and giving me more potential targets. They just aren't as potent as the big 6 because there's half of them. Shrike is also A tier and mostly misses out on S tier because of my own failings. I didn't use his rapid ingress threat at all, but him and his squad being loan up and most importantly giving JPI's OC2 just for showing up makes him a must take. I just need to make a better use of his powerful damage threat. Finally, in the A tier is the Blade Guard and the Judicia with the Blackwing Blade Shroud driven deep. The only thing stopping from being S tier is again my own utilization of them. They can just stand there menacingly and make a corner of the board a no-go zone, but I need to be pushing them up more aggressively and making sure that I'm not using them as just a lone distraction. They work best as the vanguard of my army, positioning in front of the rest of my units to make sure that I have space to play with, and they're the ones that I should be using not for actions or for holding objectives, but for choking out the board and watching over my other units for a potential heroic intervention. In B tier, it's the Combi Lieutenant, Intercessors, and 5-man squads of jump pack intercessors. All useful, all did what they were meant to do, but all of them have more potential. I'm too slow with moving my intercessors around, and their damage is no joke, and I need to be thinking about their positioning more. For game 4 or 5, I started one of the JPIs in Deep Strike, and that helped a lot. Starting both on the board feels like they just move around and spin their wheels a bit before they get a chance to use their 10 OC and decent combat threat. And then they don't really get their points worth before dying, and they aren't actually that tough. They have a lot more potential that I'm not getting out of them. And that's the same for the Combi Lieutenant. It's a great utility piece, but I'm not getting the full value out of it. This guy is in basically every single Space Marine army, and I know I could do so much more with it. In C tier, I actually have 2 very good units that did a decent amount of work. The Lone Op Jump Captain and the 10-man JBIs. The reason that these are C tier is that they do their job very well, but they aren't the best for that job. The Jump Captain is great for deep striking and doing actions and having a decent threat with his hammer, but he isn't that much of a threat, and when he's just doing actions, it feels like a bit of a waste. If I could, I'd give him the other enhancement and let him lead a unit as a turn 1 rapid ingress threat, but I think I can get the same benefit that I'm using him for now, but cheaper from a different unit. The 10-man jump back intercessors go with Shrike, and they just aren't a good enough damage threat. I feel like rapid ingressing them in with Shrike as a scary melee unit doesn't work, as they're only strength 4 AP1 D1 chainswords. They can pump out some mortal wounds, but not that many, and they just lack the oomph of, say, Vanguard veterans with Inferno pistols. They are cheaper, yes, and they are a lot of OC, but that OC wasn't ever that relevant, and they die very quickly. Without that, I lack a real punchy melee threat that can make the enemy wary of rapid ingress, so I need to think about that. And finally, D tier. And I'm really sad about this, but the Assault Centurions just didn't cut it. They're an effective blocker and can take a punch, but they don't really fit into the list. They don't really do a job I need them to do. Only in one game did they actually get some decent damage in, and that was game 5 when they managed to tag one of Roman's Repexes and nearly one-shot it in melee. They aren't scary like the Devastated Centurions, and without support from Into Darkness or coming in from reserves, they just kind of slowly waddle around. I don't really want to park them on my home objective just to screen. That feels wasteful. And even when I was rapid ingressing them in previous iterations of the list, they didn't really get to do much. Without the repulsors, they just can't get anywhere before falling over. Part of me thinks it's time to drop them. That's 300 points for far more useful units, but playing the Screaming Ravens without 18 Centurions, that just isn't right, is it? I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. I couldn't respect myself if I went to a tournament with 300 points of useful units like Inceptors or Infiltrators or Scouts. I toyed with the idea of swapping them out for 2 Invicta Warsuits, which benefit from being Phobos and have nice, heavy flamers. Maybe that'd sate my desire for a silly but functional list. Maybe I could keep the 18 Centurions with 3 blocks of 6 Devastated Centurions, but that's an extra 60 points, and I'd run it into the same issue I mentioned of space. I've been thinking a lot about this since the London GT, and I've decided it's time to remove these 2 squads of 3 Assault Centurions and replace them with 1 big block of 6. Come on now. Did you really think I was going to abandon my 18th Centurion dream? Of course not. I reckon one squad of 6 Assault Centurions, all with flamers and one with the grenade launcher for the grenades keyword, would make a nasty mid-board threat. Walk it into the middle, force my opponent to chew through 24 toughness 7 2 up save wounds, which is going to require some big commitments from the enemy to get rid of, and then I can exploit that movement with my teleporting Centurions. With flamers, you have to be careful walking near them because 66 auto hits with rerolls to wound can do a decent work against even the toughest of opponents, and the grenade keyword gives me another option to get some mortal wounds in. A block of 6 can also ensure that any monsters or vehicles I manage to get into with melee will die, and overall this will help shore up the issue I had with taking a couple of turns to swing my army around whilst my opponent could get presence in the midfield. If I had repulsors still, I'd keep these as 2 lots of 3, but I will try out the squad of 6 and see if this is a better way of playing them. There are just 2 other minor changes to the list. The 10 jump back assessment to become 10 Inferno Pistol wielding Vanguard veterans. I don't need that 21 OC. What I do need is something with a bit more bite. And 10 Inferno Pistols, lethal hits, and strength 5 melee weapons is a lot more bite, with the option to pivot to the Storm Shields if they feel a bit squishy. With Strike, these can come down 12.1 inches away on your turn with rapid ingress, and you can do nothing about it, and then they're in your face. That does put my list 20 points over, so the Jump Captain has to be dropped and replaced with a Phobos Lieutenant with the same enhancement. This guy will basically do the same job, but cheaper, and it means I can use Into Darkness to pick both him and the Combi Lieutenant up at the same time, as they're both Phobos, if I need to get more things moving. He can't move as fast as the Jump Captain, but with the enhancement, the Phobos Lieutenant will have Deep Strike, Infiltrate, Scout 6, Stealth, Lone Up, and Move, Shoot, Move. He's still pretty speedy. As of this video's release, this is the list I'll be taking to the Winchester RTT this weekend, another 1-day 3-game event. Those minor changes don't really change the overall theme of the list or my battle plan. It's basically the exact same, so I'm hoping that what I've learned from the LGT will lead me to victory and prove once and for all that 18 Centurions isn't just a meme and demands to be taken seriously. At least until the next balance patch, where everything in my list gets nerfed because of the changes that made all those units so strong that the pro players are using them to win tournaments, and after the nerfs they'll go back to use other things and leave me to try and craft a new list with the broken pieces and fewer points to play with. That's going to be fun. But thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this, go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. Support the channel either by sharing this video or by throwing money at me by becoming a member or patron like these awesome people, or buying my merch. I'm going to go lie down now because I've been speaking for way too long. Goodbye.